Being a tank player is hard. Sometimes you just feel like you're a human pinball and you're always the one getting beat up. However, even though it feels like it's hard to climb SR sometimes, I've got you covered with the top 5 tips to climbing as a tank. My name is Nate and welcome to Blizzard Guides. The life of a tank sucks, but you're going to be able to climb with this guide. I'm going to go over the methods and things that you should focus on when playing as a tank in a matchmaking game. It's a bit different between main tanks and off tanks, so I'll have a specific distinction inside of each tip, and I'll also have a main tank and off tank specific tip at the end of the video. So the first 3 tips work for tanks in general, and the last 2 are specifics. But with that out of the way, let's hop into this video. At number 5, you need to protect those that actually matter in the fight. I don't want to see you wasting your protection abilities on that one McCree who hasn't landed a shot since the open beta. In matchmaking, your teammates aren't always going to be perfect, and you're going to get people who just aren't good. Don't waste your resources on those who don't matter. But with that said, if you're on off tank, you do have to protect your main tank, and if you're on main tank, you do have to protect your main healer. But you don't need to go out of your way to bail them out of situations where they're so deep in the enemy team's lines that you're actually concerned that they may have accidentally switched sides. And on the opposite end, if your Genji is going ham and popping off, you're going to want to do your best to protect him and play with him, or just protect those people that are helping him. So if your Ana is enabling him a ton, protecting your Ana and making sure that she can do her job, helping the Genji is a good idea. Overall, you just have to focus on using your protection resources or space making resources to keep the carries on your team up and well. But with that said, I'm saying this with the idea that you're going to be going out of your way to protect them. You still do have to protect your teammates as a tank, but you can focus on protecting one extra guy a bit more than the rest and giving them a bit more help than you might with others. After all, that is your job as a tank, to protect and enable your team. At number 4, you just need to take action and not be afraid. Something that bothers me a lot about some of the lower ranked tank players that I've seen is that they just totally seem afraid to actually push up and create space and start controlling the fight. The way I see it, there are 3 pillars to good tank play: creating space, protecting your team, and controlling the fight. You need to make sure that your teammates aren't getting suffocated by the enemy team, you need to make sure that the damage isn't coming through to your teammates, and you need to make sure that you can control the actions of both your team and the enemy team. When you're on tank, stop being a wimp, push up, make sure your healers are with you, get your DPS to focus on something, and move. You have the power to do that as a tank, even if you're on an off tank. If you're on main tank, just push up and make sure that the resources are there, and if you're on off tank, just get your main tank to push up by creating an initial small pocket of space that they can use, and then make sure to provide them with some help to complete those plays. So for example, if you're on Zarya, just pushing up a little bit, using your personal bubble to create a bit of space, playing a bit aggro, and then giving your Rhino a bubble whenever he pushes up is the way to go. Trust me, even if you have a bad main tank player, they'll still be responsive to this and they'll do what they see. If you want to create space, it's literally just moving up and using your abilities depending on what the enemy is doing. If they have a lot of damage coming towards you and a little bit of defense, you want to walk forward and use your shield or damage blocking ability. And if they're playing defensively, use an offensive ability and abuse their lack of defensiveness. And an important thing to note is that not all tanks are created equally. So while a tank like Ryan is very defensive, a tank like Roadhog is only offensive, with his only damage blocking capability being actually just meat shielding and self-healing. If I say something like be defensive or protect, you need to realize that for a tank like Roadhog or Zarya or Winston, there may not be an option other than meat shielding, which is actually where their weaknesses come from as a tank. So because of that, when you're listening to these tips, you need to keep in mind that some of these tanks are better at some things and some are better at others. So you really need to force the enemy to play into your strengths and not force yourself into a place of weakness. It's all about getting up and creating a playing field for your team and preventing the critical damage from getting picks. At number 3, you're not taking the right fights. If you want to control the fight, sometimes you just gotta know when it's time to get out of the fight. This is something that extends to all roles, but it's especially important to know if you're on tank. Some fights you just can't win. If you can't win, don't go in. Whether it be because of enemy ults, first pick, general positioning, etc., whatever it might be, you need to know when not to provide the enemy team with even more ult charge by feeding them your team's health into their damage. The best way to know whether a fight is worthwhile is a few things. First, if the enemy gets an early pick, it's generally a lost fight unless you have some upper hand like an ult combo or some stellar defensive ult. If the enemy is investing a lot of ultimates, it is 100% advisable to just back up, force them to waste their ults and then turn the tables by re-engaging with some of your own ults. Even if your teammates are already engaged in the fight but the enemy team uses like 4 ultimates, just leave them to die, get out of the fight, and just make sure that you stay alive so that way you can get out of the fight and make sure that you can use your ults later on. And if your main healer goes down early, it's just generally something that you don't want to push up into unless the enemy team has less than 2 people up and you've already got an advantage beforehand. Just think about what kind of things are going to win you the fights and make sure that you're not pushing up whenever your team doesn't have that specific advantage. At number 2, we're going to go with an off-tank tip. You just gotta stick with your main tank nearly all the time. That's it. If you don't have a main tank, you probably should just switch to main tank, and if you're solo tanking, you should probably still switch to main tank. So there's never a reason for you really to be without your main tank. Seriously, off-tanks are devastating, and they're an amazing class, but they're not really that good without a main tank, with the exception of D.Va. D.Va can solo tank, but she can't really be played in a double off-tank. So my point still stands, unless you're solo D.Va. Stick with your main tank, pocket the crap out of him, and just make sure that if they're not doing so well, so like if they're low on health or their shield is dead, take their place for a short period of time and prevent them from going down. You can do this as an off tank, and trust me, it will help you win fights. If your main tank goes down, just stick around with your main healer and keep them up. You can effectively invest all of your resources into one ally and ensure that they don't die. On top of that, you can just pursue kills whenever your team has the advantage. This comes back to the knowing which fights to pick and when to take action thing. But before that, you really got to keep those crucial kingpins up on your team and make sure that your main tank is never left without a friend. You don't want him to be lonely. And finally, at number 1, the main tank tip. For main tank, just don't keep your shield up all the time and waste it. Your shield is really your most valuable resource. For Rein, you just can't hold your shield up 24/7, nor not hold it up at all. You need to predict when the heavy damage is coming in and keep your shield up whenever it is coming in, and then whenever there isn't any foreseeable damage coming in, drop your shield and let it recharge. On a reset, don't reset your shield if it's still 100% HP and not going to despawn soon. Manage where you're setting it down to, and don't put it down when you're just about to get rushed and pushed far back, since that will put your shield behind the enemy lines and you'll be without a shield for the entirety of your cooldown. And on Winston, don't just put your bubble down for the sake of bubbling. Use it whenever you're actually going to be engaging into the fight or whenever your supports actually need it. There are far too many tank players who don't respect the value of their shield. Just focus on keeping your shield's health always ready and always be blocking the critical damage, but not wasting it on some damage that your team doesn't really need protection from. It's a game of either managing resources, in the example of Rein, or cooldowns, in the example of Winston and Orisa, but you really have to play it smart. Anyway, I hope this guide helped you guys out. If you liked it, don't be afraid to drop a like and leave a comment why it helped. And if you disliked it, don't be afraid to tell us why in the comments so that I can make all of the guides better each time. If you have any specific questions or you want to join the Blizzard Guides community, be sure to check out our Discord or check out our Twitter or Instagram. Be sure to get subscribed so that you never miss any of our content. We do tips and tricks videos just like these, and also weekly Twitch highlight videos so that you can see the best plays from around the globe. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Have a nice day. My name is Nate, and this was Blizzard Guides.